Hi, my name is Mike Didonna. I'm a senior Salesforce Revenue Cloud consultant with Thunder, and today we're going to go over Salesforce Invoice Scheduler for use in Salesforce Billing. So let's start off the high-level overview of Invoice Scheduler. So Invoice Scheduler is a functionality that's the primary mechanism within Salesforce Billing that generates invoice records. With Invoice Scheduler, you can create records one at a time, individually or in groups. And also you can essentially create invoice records on demand or scheduled. And we'll go over that in a few minutes to show exactly how that works with Invoice Scheduler. One of the key points on Invoice Scheduler that you have to keep in mind is that it looks primarily at the order products. So in looking at just the out of the box with no like tweaks or even specified fields, invoices created with Invoice Scheduler have no relationship to the order. So when you look at invoices invoice records that have been created, you'll see there's an order field available on the invoice, but that will be blank for all invoices that have been created with the Invoice Scheduler. And that's because the framework of Invoice Scheduler the idea is to invoice a client for all their order products when these order products are eligible to be invoiced, regardless of whether they're on the same order. So Invoice Scheduler, as I said before, looks at the order products and basically asks, are these available to be invoiced? And if so, grab them all for each account and put them on an invoice and create an invoice line for that. So again, you can have an invoice that spans multiple orders with Invoice Scheduler. And because of this, you cannot have a direct relationship between the invoice and an order, because an invoice can have invoice lines that relate to order products that are on very different orders and not any one particular order. Another thing to keep in mind for Invoice Scheduler is you can have as many Invoice Schedulers running in an org as you like. So you can there's various types, and we'll go over that in a few minutes, but there's no limit to how many, other than drain on resources, how many Invoice Schedulers you can have running. So for example, you could have in this example, we'd have two Invoice Schedulers, one that runs at 7 a.m. and another at 6 p.m. And we'll just state that those are daily. They run daily at those times. And so you can look and see what invoice generation would look like in this kind of example. So if an order product becomes eligible at 5 a.m., it's going to get picked up and invoiced by the 7 a.m. Invoice Scheduler. And so if any order products that have become eligible after that 7 a.m. Invoice Scheduler run, such as the 8 a.m. product there in the second row, that will have to wait, and that will get picked up by the 6 p.m. Invoice Scheduler. And then also you have another order product that's becomes eligible 1 p.m. in the afternoon. Again, that will also be picked up by that 6 p.m. Invoice Scheduler. And then finally, any order products that are eligible for invoicing after that 6 p.m. scheduler run, such as at 6:45 p.m., those will wait and get picked up by the 7 a.m. Invoice Scheduler. Okay, let's go ahead and take a look now at Invoice Scheduler and the fields and setting one up. So here I'm in an environment, so I can just go here once Billing's installed and look for Invoice Scheduler. As you can see, I have one already created, but let's assume we're going to create a new one. So we'll just click on New. And let's take a look at the fields. So here on Invoice Scheduler, you're going to name it. And here, this is the type. So once I name it, and then it's a type. And so again, as we talked about before, you can have various types of invoice schedulers running. A daily means it's going to run once a day, obviously weekly once a week, monthly once a month, and then once is a one-timer. And that's kind of how you generate invoices on demand. You can create a one-time and point it at specific orders or order products on that. So this is the type you want. Daily, weekly, monthly obviously are recurring, so they'll run on a schedule. Once it runs, if it's a once invoice schedule, then it's done and won't run again. Here, if you're using multi-currency, you'll have the opportunity to select a currency to be used for this invoice scheduler. So if you were using USD and you have a multi-currency and you select USD, then for that invoice scheduler, it will only create invoices for orders/order products that are in USD. If you want to make sure that this invoice scheduler is currency agnostic, you simply check this box, which is include all currencies. So as I said before, invoice scheduler looks primarily at order products, but it does take one field into account on the order. And on the order, there's a field called invoice batch. And so if you set that value on the order to something like batch 1, and then select that as far as your invoice scheduler, it will only, that particular invoice scheduler that has a batch value in here will only pick up those order products for those order products where the order batch value matches this. So if you want to restrict the number of orders invoice scheduler looks at, you can use it through this mechanism of batches, where you would set the batch value on the order and then set also the corresponding batch value on your invoice scheduler. The other thing to note about this, let's get rid of this here, is that this pick list can be added to. So you can add custom values into this pick list and assign those onto your orders and also within your invoice schedulers. So you're not limited to just these 6. You obviously create custom ones and use automation to assign those values onto orders, given whatever rules you want to implement to assign those. Okay, now let's look at start date information. And so this is primarily for one-time or daily invoice schedulers. So you're gonna pick the date it's gonna start on. And for this one, I'll say 11/1, for example, and pick the time. And again, you set the time you want to run. And then you want the target date of when you want this to start picking up order products. So on an order product, and I'm going to switch over to an order product now, there is a value on the order product called next billing date. And so if you see on this example, on this order product, the next billing date is 11/11/22. And now going back to invoice scheduler, the target date looks at the next billing date on the order product. And if the target date is on or after the next billing date on an activated and ready to invoice order product, then invoice scheduler will pick it up. So for example, if I set this target date here to 11/22 and saved it, and we went through and saved it, and if this order product with the next billing date of 11/11/2022 is activated and ready to be invoiced, then assuming it hasn't been picked up prior to this date, 11/22/2022, it will be picked up by this invoice scheduler and placed on an invoice. If I leave the target date of 11/22 and then create an order with an order product, but that order product starts, let's say, on 12/1, even after I activate that order product and it's eligible to be invoiced, it won't be picked up by invoice scheduler until it gets to 12/1. So it'll run from 11/22, it'll run each day, won't pick up that one that starts on 12/1 with the next billing date of 12/1, and then 12/1, it will say, oh, that date matches the target date here, and it's an eligible order product. I will pick it up now and place it on an invoice. The invoice date is also the date you want to stamp on the invoice. It will use it as a proxy of a proxy for a created date. So if I started on 11/22, and if I wanted to maybe change this date to maybe say 12/1, that means starting on 11/22, when I start to create invoice records, that they will stamp them as 12/1. So this is the way you can change. You can post date invoices, you can future date invoices. And this is the value that Invoice Scheduler uses when it also calculates the due date. It will take this date plus the payment terms and calculate a due date on that. So for the most part, you're going to want to set up your target date and your invoice date are really usually the same date, unless you need to post date or future date an invoice. And it's the same thing here on weekly configurations and monthly configurations. Again, similar to these work like target dates. It's target day of the week and invoice day of the week. So again, the target day of the week here is a little off. So again, if I pick a target day of the week, again, it's going to look at that date and going back to my order product. So the target day of the week is 1. It's going to look at this invoice order product for that invoice. for that order, and say, oh, that target date is on the 11th. Therefore, going back to Invoice Scheduler, it won't run until the target day of the week is the 11th. And then again, this is going to set, again, this is analogous to the invoice date of what date it shows up on the invoice. It's the same idea with month configurations. And so I understand this is a little kind of confusing on this layout. This field is analogous to this field is analogous to this one. So for the most part, you can set that up. Most clients set it up to run on a daily basis. Again, because if you have invoices that are out there that are activated and eligible to be, order products that are out there and eligible to be invoiced, Invoice Scheduler won't pick them up until the next billing date matches the day it runs. You can also set up Invoice Scheduler to bill for usage products and bill usage charges, and to automatically post invoices. So this will create the invoice, and instead of creating the invoice in a draft status, this Invoice Scheduler with creating invoices will create them and then create them with a posted status. And now let's take a look at the wrap up for Invoice Scheduler. Okay, just to come back and wrap up on Invoice Scheduler here. So some things to keep in mind. So Invoice Scheduler functionality runs through a defined set of rules and a defined order of those rules when it's placing order products onto invoices. And the rules it runs through and this order of them cannot, and how that's applied cannot be modified. So it's not, you can't change the rules or disregard the rules for that. And if you're wondering what those rules are, don't worry, we'll get to that in the next video that we create on this. Another thing to keep in mind, Invoice Scheduler, as I've said before, when it runs, it looks primarily at order products and a little bit to orders, and it does not consider the following objects: the quote lines, contract, subscriptions on that contract, or even what you had for breakfast. So again, you need to know what Invoice Scheduler looks at, and it can tell, and it looks only at orders and order products. None of these other CPQ or billing / objects. And in Invoice Scheduler, if you're having trouble generating invoices and you think an Invoice Scheduler is broken or not functioning properly, that's not the case. It runs. It simply runs. And if the product doesn't get invoiced, it's because of a data issue on the order product that we'll go over later, or something's blocking Invoice Scheduler, such as a validation rule or something on the invoice, from saving the invoice record or its corresponding invoice line records. So it always runs, and if there's something blocking it from completing, it's usually something, like I said, on an order product that's not correct, or you have a validation that's preventing Invoice Scheduler from creating and then saving the corresponding invoice lines and invoices. So with that, thank you for watching. I hope it's been educational and maybe even entertaining. Have a nice day.